Okay, we're going to learn about a particular intervention that is that comes out of acceptance and commitment therapy. And it fits in really beautifully with the CBT program. One of the things that this intervention can provide is another level of treatment, group therapy. So this is a group therapy, and yes, we do use it with psychosis. And we actually work directly with voices and sometimes even delusions. So this particular intervention or group therapy, I found in an acceptance and commitment therapy text. The text is acceptance and commitment therapy for psychosis. So I found the intervention and I researched it a little bit, and then I ran a pilot group. My experience with the pilot group is that it really needs a licensed therapist to do that work with a co-facilitator who does not need to be licensed. It's relatively easy to learn. It's a lot of fun to do. And it provides this extra type of treatment that we can add in. It is a third wave approach. And so what that means is it's all about mindfulness, right? And while there had been some concern early on about mindfulness being used with people with psychosis, this is absolutely safe to use. It's gotten great reviews, and it's shown to be clinically effective. So adding this as a part of a larger CBT program would really round out any kind of CBT programming that you have now. It is a time-limited group. It runs specifically for 8 weeks. And it really provides an opportunity for clients to practice, learn, and practice mindfulness skills on a regular basis and approach the relationship with their voices in a very different way. So we use acceptance and mindfulness and acceptance and commitment therapy in order to get that behavior change that we're looking for. It's also great for improving psychological cognitive flexibility. So as we know, people who are working with delusions that tend to be very rigid, this will help expand and provide different points of view for what the person is experiencing. So one of the things that we do is we do self in context, right? Like it's about the client, but it's also about what's around the client and how they're responding to things around them in the present moment and getting a different point of view. So just by a show of little hands up or whatever, how many of you would say, how would you all answer this question here? The sun rises in the east. Would you say yes to that? No? Yes, you all would say yes? You all would say yes, okay. So acceptance and commitment therapy is going to turn that answer around. Does the sun really rise in the east? Contextually, no, it doesn't. It does not rise. We move around it, and it gives the illusion that the sun is rising. And so with acceptance and commitment therapy, we're really changing that point of view pretty drastically, right? And that's what we're talking about when we talk about in context, okay? It really does open up a very different way of looking at things. Cognitive behavioral therapy is all about cognitive restructuring. We use that in walking well clients as well as people with psychosis. And what we're looking at with acceptance and commitment therapy is less about cognitively restructuring somebody's notion about something. What we're doing is just approaching the problem from a completely different perspective, and you'll get to see what I mean by this. It's less about trying to change what the client is thinking and more about having them be aware of what's happening inside them and around them. There are different concepts that we use in acceptance and commitment therapy, and they're laid out on what is affectionately called the hexaplex, which is a great little term. And it shows the 6 basic components of acceptance and commitment therapy. And if you look at this, you'll see that there are some relationships here. For example, acceptance and diffusion are kind of on opposite ends of the scale. Acceptance is, I'm just going to accept what is. Diffusion is, I'm going to let go of something that I'm holding on to. Diffusion, for example, I'm letting go of stuff, and committed action, I'm committed to doing something rather than letting it go. There are relationships that are dialectic. In other words, they're, we're pretty familiar with that term. They're opposites, but true about the same concept. And some of them are actually relationships that work well together. Okay, so here's this poll, self as context. That's how I behave, how I'm responding to the environment. Contact with self in the present moment is just focusing on me and not worrying about the context. So our goal with acceptance and commitment therapy is to increase cognitive flexibility, a willingness to accept what is, including all symptoms. It reduces experiential avoidance. And so what we mean by that in ACT therapy is we reduce maintenance cycle behavior. We use guided meditation with the understanding that there's never an elongated period of silence like what we would find in normal meditation, right? Psychotic experiences are not considered special in any way. They just are part of thoughts, urges, sensations. And because of that, it helps really the client move away from their symptoms in that grasping way, like this is true, this is what's happening. It really helps the client to step back and take a look at what's happening inside them. Symptom reduction is not the goal. And the reason it's not the goal is because a lot of people take their medications adherently and continue to have voices and hallucinations anyway. So we might as well just take what's happening and work with it. We want to help them see the ways in which they struggle with themselves, with their voices, with their delusions, and help them recognize their habitual process when those things begin to start. So we introduce the attitude of kind of letting go. So what we see with clients who are struggling with delusions and auditory hallucinations is that there's an almost immediate power struggle. The power struggle is to make things stop, make things stop. And of course, that's like just being in a tug of war. It's never ending. The voices are going to continue. I'm going to continue to try to stop them. And it's an endless tug of war. This is one of the metaphors that acceptance and commitment therapy uses. And I've actually done this metaphor with a client in individual therapy where I had a rope. It actually was my belt. And we pretended that we were talking about an issue, and we pretended that there was a crevice in between us, and we kind of did this role play with him and whoever he was having the issue with. And he finally got to the place where he realized what the solution was here. And that is, when you're in a tug of war with things, the only way to win that game is not to play. And so that's what we're getting our clients to do, is to learn how not to play the tug of war game. So again, it's pretty efficacious here. Effect sizes were small to medium, which is very consistent with CBTp. And these effect sizes are pretty moderate. 0.30 is a little on the small side, but 0.4 is getting up there into the moderate range. When we look at the long-term effects of acceptance and commitment therapy, we can see, at least in this study, that rehospitalization went down immensely after ACT treatment, over treatment as usual. Okay, so the risk rate for rehospitalization, the risk rate of getting back into the hospital just was amazing. And survival of treatment effects grew from the beginning of treatment through day 120, and the treatment, or 120 through day 365. So the treatment impact was very enduring. Okay. So I know I haven't told you a lot about what exactly acceptance and commitment therapy is, and I certainly can't describe that all in a 20-minute presentation, but this group that I'm going to explain to you is a great group. It's a great thing to consider looking into. It's called ACT for Life. The group was originally written for 4 sessions, an hour each, which I thought was just painfully short. So I rewrote it to make it 8 sessions for an hour and a half each. When I describe, and I did it with a convenience sample. So it was the agency's ACT team, which had some fairly cognitively impaired individuals in there. You're familiar with ACT team clients, right? So when I presented this, the staff said, we're pretty skeptical that this is going to work. You're not going to be able to get people to get up and do role plays. It's just never going to work. We made this a once a week group. Nobody was screened to get into the group, right? And I had a co-facilitator who was unfamiliar with ACT, and so she was there to support, but wasn't really active in facilitating. And what this requires is all participants in the group to do a role play. And the role play is great. It involves everybody in the group pretty much. And it got people to encourage each other to do the role play and to be a part of what was happening. The role plays allowed for humor and laughter, which we all did get a lot of that. Okay, so the metaphor that we're going to use is passengers on the bus. Passengers on the bus is a great intervention that basically introduces the idea that voices are basically passengers on your bus. And it doesn't look like they're going to get off. And they keep you from going where you want to go, right? So this person may want to go to school or, you know, maybe go to work, but the passengers on the bus are saying, you're terrible, you're a failure, you're awful, you're terrible. And so, you know, you better not go down that path, right? There's a great animation of this metaphor that you really ought to take a look at. And I can give you that link if you like it. But in the beginning of the group, we warm up. And so this is kind of an example of warm up things that we do, like 3 things that I love to do: mindful breathing, activities around values. Acceptance and commitment therapy is heavy on the values side of things. And so we're trying to get participants in the group to behave in a value-directed manner rather than, that's what their focus is, rather than on trying to stop the symptoms. It does require a PowerPoint when you do this group. So the PowerPoint takes everybody through mindfulness activities that are active and not quiet. And it introduces this metaphor. So the client who's working is the driver. And we're having all these things happen inside the driver. And so these are representative of what's happening inside this person. These people are played by other people in the group, okay? And what happens is, come on, fast forward. Oh, I see. I made it so it would do this. What we do is we have the client say, identify what their values are, what their goals are, and what the actions related to those goals are. Okay, so for instance, I might have a value of a work ethic. So my goals are to do some kind of meaningful work, and what actions will I take to do that? Okay, along with all these voices that are telling me I can't and I'm worthless. So when we have passengers on the bus like this, they're tenacious, they don't want to let go, they're not going to get off. But the driver is trying to go somewhere. And so the driver, or the client who's doing the work, gives each of the passengers a sentence to say that's familiar with their voices. That's the same as their voices. So they have a lot of different voices. There's a lot of different stuff going on. And we set it up so that there's a driver and his passengers are behind him. And while he's trying to go somewhere, wherever that might be, to work or the ice cream stand or to the store, his voices are saying out loud just what he hears in his head. And so it's in real time, it's right there. And even with this ACT team, these guys were pretty ruthless with each other. I mean, they would say, you know, you're awful, you're terrible, along with all the colorful metaphors that voices tend to use, right? And so the driver's job is to either get those passengers off the bus, tell them to shut up and take them with them or something, because he can't drive, right? So he's got to be clear about the direction that he wants to go. And so the idea is he's got to figure out a way to get these passengers off the bus so he can have his life, right? So what happens is that he tries to push the voices off. Maybe he stops and lectures them. Maybe he gets out of the bus and leaves the passengers in. None of those are going to get him to his goal. So what eventually happens is that the person decides they're going to go in their directed, value-directed goal anyway. We're going to go there. I'm going to go to work regardless because these passengers are going to be here. And that's part of the acceptance of this whole thing. My voices are here. There's nothing I'm going to do with them. I can't influence them that much. I'm just going to go do what I need to do. Okay. And so in those who participated in the role plays, they really did gain some insight into what was happening. The one guy that did a role play, his voices told him that he was awful and terrible and told him he was gay. These were all messages from a parent when he was growing up. So he had all of these people in the ACT group telling him all of those things right out loud in group therapy. And he tried all kinds of things to get him to shut up. And finally, he turned around and said, "This is ridiculous. I'm not gay. I'm going to go to the ice cream stand." And so all the voices in the back went, "Oh man," and he pretended to turn then to the, whichever way he wanted to go. And he was like, "That's it. I'm not paying attention to you anymore." Soon after, he joined his therapist to go for a walk, which is something he hadn't done. And he they went to a walk to the community coffee shop, I think. And then soon after, he began to think about doing this himself and actually did it. So this was a client who got a lot out of this. He was cognitively impaired and had difficulty with insight for sure, but he got a different perspective all of a sudden in this group. Interestingly, the patients who were in the group were also being carried around by ACT team staff. And what they noticed after the group ended was that their clients continued to practice breathing and talk about the mindfulness activities wherever they were transporting the clients to. And they were very, very surprised that that memory lasted and that they were actually practicing in the car. Eventually, one of the case managers who helped me facilitate the group asked for more information. So even we all get something out of the therapy that we do, but it was really interesting to see this. And I use acceptance and commitment therapy in my own personal life as well. So wrapping up, this is about one particular intervention that acceptance and commitment therapy gives to us. And it's incredibly effective for an 8-week intervention. And I would encourage you to think about researching this a little bit more, certainly acceptance and commitment therapy, and see what you can find about incorporating some of this work. This can be done individually. I've done it individually, and there's a whole lot of resources about acceptance and commitment therapy that are really wonderful for use with psychosis. So that's it. That's all I've got for you today. And I'm curious if there are any questions about anything that I've said today.